Hare Krishna. So today I'll discuss, based on the topic of the Bhagavad Gita, the broad theme of discipline, and talk about it in three broad parts. First is why discipline seems undesirable. Second is why discipline is desirable. And third is how discipline is doable. So, three broad parts. Why it feels undesirable, why it is desirable, and how it is doable. So, I'll speak this based on three broad verses from the Bhagavad Gita. So let's begin. I'll be sharing my screen and drawing some things. So the verses I'll be using. So why discipline feels undesirable but is desirable and is doable. Okay. Something like okay. Just scratch it. So I'll speak this based on three verses, 18, 37, 38, and then 6, 36, 35, 36. So let's begin first point. Now, why does discipline seem undesirable? When we talk about discipline seeming undesirable, means if you have to be disciplined, you feel, oh, it's too difficult. I have to give this up, I won't be able to do this, I can't do that. So why does it feel undesirable? So discipline feels undesirable. So why is that? That we can understand based on the nature of happiness. So Krishna talks about this in 1837 and 1838. This is two kinds of happiness, he says. One is happiness that elevating or sattvic happiness in the mode of goodness. So he says it tastes like poison in the beginning but is like nectar in the end. On the other hand, he says rajasic happiness. Rajasic is in the mode of passion, and he says it tastes like nectar in the beginning but is poison in the end. Yattad agre vishamiva pariname amrutopamam. So agra, so here the way I have depicted it is that you will see that the initial part is relatively small as compared to the eventual part. But in terms of our experience, this particular distance is not small. It may go for a good amount of time. And during that time, it feels like poison. So this is something which we see in a daily life also. Say, if we don't have a bit of exercising, and maybe we are told that you have to exercise if you want to maintain your health, if you have got back, if you get back problems or this or that. Now, if somebody has to exercise, it's not usually pleasant. We're not used to working our body, so it is difficult. Or if somebody gets diabetes and they're told that you cannot eat sweets. Now it's difficult to give it. It's like poison. But what is the nectar that is at the end? Diabetes, a person feels sometimes dizzy, a person sometimes feels all kind of bodily dysfunctions. And if a person becomes free from that, then the body becomes much more fit to function effectively. So similarly with exercise, when we exercise regularly, eventually we not just feel fitter, we feel more energetic, we feel clear-headed, we can function more effectively. So there are many things in life. Say suppose we decide to learn a new language. Say we are posted in some country where maybe we are posted in, say in Canada, and we have to learn French over there. Now it's not easy to learn a new language. But if we do go about learning it, what will happen is initially there is poison. That, it's, we'll actually tend to speak in our normal language and we struggle to find the right word. But once we go there, once we learn that language, then communication becomes so much easier. We don't need to rely on someone, we don't need to worry whether the person is understood or not. So there are many things in life where there is poison initially but nectar eventually. Now, why does discipline feel undesirable? So because this phase of poison that is there, this is it's difficult to endure. It's difficult to go on through this phase during the time when we have to deal with it. Because of that, it feels undesirable. And similarly, there are many things which are like nectar in the beginning, but they'll be like poison in the end. And this nectar is difficult to give up. So because of this, we have to go through this. Oh, here in one sense we have to go through this. Here we have to go away from this. And this is something which is difficult. So like, again, same example, if it is somebody is diabetes, they like to eat sweets. It's difficult to give up sweets. Or if we want to wake up in the morning, early morning. So we wake up so that we can do our spiritual practices, we can do our studies, we can tap the auspicious energies of the morning time. But then, waking up early in the morning, it's not easy. The first instinct is as soon as we wake up, turn off the clock and go to sleep. Or there's no clock, somebody else has woken up, maybe not physically, but not audibly, but mentally may curse that person. Why did I disturb myself? This is going off, the screen is turned off over here.
It's working.
It's working, okay. So, now when this happens, at that time, it is extremely difficult to persist. So for us to persist, both things, to give up this is difficult and to stick to it, to give up the initial nectar. Now where is the poison eventually? Like suppose we have to study for an exam, but instead of that we spend time on social media. Reading this news, watching this video, looking at that notification, spending time on dozen people's social media profiles. What does this person mean? What does that person mean? There's some titillation in that. But then eventually, you say, I wasted so much of my time. What was I doing? So there will be nectar in the beginning, but there's poison in the end. And eventually, what is that poison? It is not just that we may see people who are equal to us, they've learned so much, they've developed so many skills, they have become so accomplished. Just turn off the screensaver. So now, in this particular case, it feels undesirable. So the first two parts I discussed. Why does it feel undesirable? Because of the initial poison in the initial nectar. Now, but why is it desirable? It is desirable because this eventual nectar is actually wonderful. It can open new options in our life. It can open new avenues for us. It can provide us new experiences. We can learn so much, we can experience so much, we can grow so much. But this poison, there is no way to get to it with this nectar. There's no way to get to it unless we go through the poison. So that's why it is desirable. Now how does it become doable? So it is desirable but feels undesirable. Let's try to understand this from another perspective. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives also a model of our inner self. So till now what I talked about was the nature of outer pleasures. So there is what is the nature of outer happiness. And now let's look at the nature of our inner world. So in our inner world, there is the intelligence, there is the mind. And all these together comprise our inner world. Now, the soul is who we are. That is our essential identity. This is the source of consciousness. The intelligence tends to be reflective. It thinks long term. And this is impulsive. Now, we could use the word impulsive. You could also use the word spontaneous for it. It just doesn't think much, it just acts automatically. So now, when this happens, the soul can either listen to the intelligence, the soul listens to the intelligence, the soul will act in this way, or the soul may listen to the mind, and then it may act in a different way. So if the soul may listen to the mind, and it may act in a different way. And in this case, what happens is, for the soul, there is a choice to make. How am I going to act? Whom am I going to listen to? Now, when this is happening, we could say that there is one important differentiation, which, if we understand, it can make a significant difference in our perception of discipline. I said two things. It feels undesirable, but is desirable. Now, when we say, how can the same thing be undesirable and desirable? So, because our desires are not singular. Our desires are multi-layer. Let me explain this and we'll come back to this. So, when we talk about desire, we think, okay, this is what I desire. This is my desire. However, we can say that our desires are multi-layer. So what is multi-layer? This is what we want. That is the superficial, the desire that are at the top. But deeper, there is what we want to want. Now, what is the difference between what we want and what we want to want? Now, what I want is, eat as many delicacies as possible. That's the urge that is there. But what I want to want, there is a deeper part of me. What it wants is, let me be disciplined, let me be self-regulated, let me be focused on the important things in my life. So if we understand that our desires are multi-layered, so as long as we think that what we want is my desire, then we will think, oh, I'll have to give up my desire. But we have many desires within us. And say, as students, what we want is, maybe we want to say, we want to have fun in college. We want to hang out with friends, we want to go to movies. Typically, we want to date and have all kinds of fun. That's what we want. But there is also another part of us which is responsible. What we want is, we want to learn our subject, we want to prepare so that we have a good career in the future. We want to contribute to society with our talents. We want to become a good human being, a worthwhile, a responsible citizen, a person who makes a difference in the world. So, even if we don't bring in spirituality, still there is this tension in everyone. We could say what we want and what we want to want. So, even in what we say as non-spiritual life, for example, most people, what we want, maybe that they want to be an enjoyer. But what they want to want is maybe they want to be an achiever. You want to go further deeper. Achiever means, oh, I want to study, I want to come first in my class. Now, if somebody wants to spend lots of times in just spending time in just having so-called fun, then you cannot be an achiever. But even deeper, you could say, hey, somebody wants to be a contributor. That means I want to contribute to something, some good cause. I want to eventually, nowadays, especially in the Western world, and I can see in this nice westernized world, there is something called as post-material values. It is not non-material values, it is post-material values. Now, post-material values means what? That maybe in 1950s, 1960s, even 1970s, 80s to some extent, young people, their primary concern was how can I get a good job, how can I have a lot of money, and how can I make it big in life. But now it is increasingly changing. Young people actually, yes, everybody needs money, everybody wants those things in life, but people want jobs that are meaningful. People want to do something which will make a difference in the world. So that primary concern is not just what will give me most money. I think what will have the most meaning for my life. So many people turn away from careers that may be lucrative to careers that are more fulfilling for them. In some ways, we can say that people are aligning more with their varna, trying to find out what their nature is and act accordingly. So post-material. So it's not non-material. It's not spiritual necessarily. But post-material. So they want to do something meaningful. That means they want to contribute. So our desires are multi-layered. So what we want and what we want to want. To understand the difference between these two, we can consider the words. Krishna says 270. In 270, Krishna uses the word kama kami. And in fact, he says natu kama kami. That means he's saying, don't be a desirer of desire. Don't be a desirer of desire. What does it mean? That means certain desires may pop up inside you. But just because a desire has popped up inside you, that doesn't mean it is your desire. It doesn't necessarily mean that is your most important desire. That it's just something just come. It is there for some time. It will go away. No, calm. So it's sometimes when we think of disciplining ourselves, we feel that I'm saying no to myself. I'm depriving myself. I am suppressing myself. Well, it could be, but it doesn't have to necessarily be like that. Generally, when we equate discipline with deprivation or repression or suppression. When we equate this like this, when we are equating like this, actually what are we doing is, we are having this conception that my desire is one thing only. This is what I desire. Why do you say that I can't have it? So, however, if we have this vision, desires are multi-layered, then we see that actually discipline is not deprivation. It is actually fulfillment of something deeper. It is redirection of my attention from a superficial part of me to a deeper part of me. Now, combining the multiple images that we have discussed till now. So what I told about our desires being multi-layered. So first is what we want and what we want to want. What we want to want. So actually we could say at a broad correlation, what we want comes from the mind. And what we want to want comes from the intelligence. Broadly. Or we can say there is what is called sometimes as the lower self and then there is the higher self. So higher self means this is part of the self which thinks of higher realities, which delves on deeper truths in life. So what we are trying to understand here is, we are not saying no to ourselves when we are disciplining ourselves. We are actually saying yes to a deeper part of ourselves. And once we understand this, so what do we need to do? We need to, if we want to choose our deeper desires. So it is that, so we could put it, discipline. This is one of my favorite definitions of discipline. On Gitaji website, I have written about 100 articles on discipline with all different understandings of our disciplines. So discipline means what I want most. I ensure that it is greater than what I want first. Now, what I want most and what I want first. What I want first means as soon in the morning when the alarm clock rings, what I want first is turn it off and go office. So generally the mind is the outer part of the self. So what I want first is what the mind says. But what I want most, I don't want just to be sleeping for a long, long time. I want to do something meaningful. I want to purify myself. I want to learn scripture. I want to live a worthwhile life. So what I want most and what I want first. What I want most comes from the intelligence. What I want first comes from the mind. So slowly, steadily, we need to recognize what I want most has to be, this is who I really am, or this is who I really want to be. This is what is important for me. And when we are able to do this, then we will find that purification will actually become, that discipline will become much, much easier. So now, putting all the diagrams together, which I talked about the nature of the outer world, then I talked about nature of outer pleasure, then I talked about nature of inner pleasure. Nature of outer pleasure and nature of the inner world. So let's put it all together now. So we have the outer pleasure is poison, nectar. Then we have outer pleasure is, this is nectar, poison. So this is sattvic happiness, this is rajasic happiness. And then we have on the other side, we have the soul, the intelligence, and the mind. All these together are the inner world. Now, so if the soul identifies with the intelligence, that means if we focus on what we want to want, if that is what we are reminding ourselves regularly, that is where hearing philosophy, that is why contemplation, that is why that's what good association helps us. Then what will happen is, our vision, we will be able to see beyond this to this. There is poison, but beyond the poison there is nectar. And therefore, we will say yes to this. And also, we will be able to see beyond this to this. And then we will say no to this. So to the extent we identify with the higher self, we will acknowledge to the extent we identify with the intelligence, or we take the inputs of the intelligence as priority. To that extent, we will, there is this poison over here, but there is a nectar beyond it. And that's what makes the poison worth it. It's bearable. And similarly, there's nectar over here, but there's poison after it. It's not worth it. So basically, when you say tick means what it means is, so here, this tick means it's worthwhile. It will be difficult, but it's worthwhile. On the other hand, there is nectar, but here what happens is, it's not worthwhile. Because the poison makes it too much, just not worth it. Now, conversely, if we go to the opposite, if we tend to identify with our mind, that means whatever pops up within us, we need to start listening to it. Then all that will happen is, we will see this poison. And we'll say, what we'll say is, hey, this is too much trouble. It's too much trouble. So what is happening is, because we are not seeing the nectar afterward, hey, there's so much poison. And then, here we will see this, and we will feel, this is too much to give up. Hey, so much pleasure, how can I give it? So too much to give up. So essentially, we often think that sometimes when we are not able to persist in our discipline, we think I lack willpower. Then it could be that we lack willpower. Now, these two concepts with which I'll conclude. So there is willpower which can bring persistence, or you can say willpower can help us to persist through the initial poison when we go to the nectar. And we often think I lack willpower. I can't persist through it. Well, that may be true. Sometimes we do need willpower. But many times what we think is a lack of willpower is actually a lack of wisdom. The two are different things. Wisdom means I am not internally convinced that after this poison there will be some nectar. Or I am still not convinced that after this nectar there is going to be some poison. Like when the scriptures say, if we engage unlimitedly in sense gratification without any regulation, there's a lot of distress. What happens is, there's internally a part of us, we disbelieve it. We secretly disbelieve it. Maybe it is true, but maybe I can be an exception. So what happens is, it's a lack of not so much willpower, it's a lack of wisdom. Wisdom means that our intelligence is not yet strong enough to say no to the mind's ideas. So we can say wisdom, willpower is what will enable us to persist. But wisdom is what will enable us to actually begin to endeavor itself. So if we try, we'll find that it's difficult, but it's not as difficult as I thought. So suppose we try to fast on some holy days. If we never fasted, fasting might seem very difficult. And we try it, maybe initially feel it very difficult, but after some time, it's not that difficult. Not as difficult as I thought. So like that, what happens is wisdom, if we have, then we can endeavor. And if we endeavor, eventually we find that, I can do it. So for us, we need both these two W's, willpower and wisdom. But we focus on sometimes we feel I don't have willpower. Okay, I don't have willpower right now. It's not something I don't have willpower. I may have less willpower, somebody else may have more willpower. Or for somebody else, the poison might be very little. If somebody is already habituated from their childhood to say wake up at 6 o'clock, then maybe for them to wake up at 4 o'clock is not difficult. But somebody is from there habituated to wake up at 8 o'clock. And for them to wake up at 4 o'clock may be more difficult. So for some people, in some cases, the initial poison may be more in some cases. Somebody who is never really into meditating, they just eat meat sometimes for experimenting or just exploring. Then if they have to give up meat, it's no big deal. Somebody else, it might be a big deal. So, which initial nectar might be too irresistible, which initial poison might be too much to bear, that will vary from person to person. And that's why sometimes we have to not just look at others and compare with others. We look at ourselves, see where we are, and see how we can take steps forward. And then self-discipline will become doable. So if we focus on increasing our wisdom by hearing scripture, getting ourselves to understand that after the nectar there is poison, after this poison there is nectar. So we get ourselves to convince ourselves of it. Our intelligence becomes strong enough so that we start listening to the mind less and start listening to the intelligence more. Then we will find that self-discipline will become easier for us. It will become doable, and then there will be a dramatic self-transformation in our capacity to make resolutions, take resolutions, and become better human beings at large. So I'll summarize what I discussed today. So broadly, three things. The first point I discussed was the nature of pleasure, nature of happiness, how there is initial happiness, which is like sattvic happiness is nectar in the beginning, poison giving nectar in the end, and opposite for rajasic happiness. And then I talked about the nature of the self, more especially nature of desires. So this what we want and what we want to want are often two different things. So if we identify only with what we want or what we want first, then we'll think of self-discipline as deprivation. But if we think of what we want to want, and what we want the most, then we'll see that self-deprivation is actually the self-discipline is redirection. So we need to identify more with. So there are the desires of the intelligence and desires of the mind. Its nature of desire is multi-level. And then lastly, how does discipline become doable? See, we work on willpower, but we work much more first on wisdom. So here regularly remind ourselves that actually the thought that comes up first, the desire that comes up first, that is not necessarily the right one, that is not necessarily the decisive one. That is not my defining desire. So internally, as we learn to identify more with the intelligence view of the world than with the mind's view of the world, that is where wisdom comes in. So wisdom means to identify more with what the intelligence is saying than what the mind is saying. And willpower means to be able to do what the intelligence is saying and to say no to what the mind is saying. So we could say wisdom is more internal, willpower is more translating the internal to the external. And we need both, but very often when we feel that I lack willpower, what we lack is actually wisdom. And by increasing the wisdom, our willpower will also increase. And thus, we can cultivate self-discipline and bring about self-transformation. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, how do we discipline our mind during chanting and things of various incidents that have happened or of services? There are different degrees of disciplining the mind. In general, with respect to chanting, japa, it's always going to be a challenge. Because until the time when we are able to perceive Krishna as non-different from the holy name, till that time the holy name will just sound like a sound. Just seem to be like a sound, and it will not seem that interesting. And if something is not interesting, focusing the mind on that which doesn't seem interesting is actually, it's actually demanding, it's difficult. So there is the holy name and there is Krishna. Now, when there is realization, we'll understand that they both are equal. And when this realization comes in, the more we see the holy name and Krishna to be equal, the more there will be absorption, the more there will be taste. But we're just chanting the holy name, but then Krishna is somewhere far away. And there's no connection between the two that we are able to perceive. Then what happens is, then the chanting becomes distracted, difficult, boring, tiring. It becomes difficult. It becomes distracted and it becomes difficult. So now this connection between the holy name and Krishna, that will happen spontaneously. That from the nama, we say nama, rupa, guna, lila, as we say. From the nam, the rupa and rupa, guna, lila will all manifest eventually. But till they manifest eventually, spontaneously, we may need to connect them consciously. That this is not just a sound this is holy name. So if we can't focus on the holy name, then, and we don't have that to realize the holy name not different from Krishna, so we give our mind some area to wander. What is the area? The mind can wander anywhere and everywhere in the world. But we try to let the mind wander around some manifestation of Krishna that is related with the holy name. So for example, before we chant the holy names, we may remember a pastime of Krishna which we feel very inspired by. We may have a picture of Krishna associated with that pastime and remind ourselves, this is the Lord that I am calling out to when I am chanting these holy names. Or we can remember some glories of the holy name, and that will give us that conviction. Even if we are not the personal realization, we don't have the experience, at least intellectual reminder is there. This is actually Krishna. So if the mind if our attention doesn't stay here, instead of it going anywhere like this, What happens is let it go over here, and from here let it come back here. Goes over here, let it come back here. So surround ourselves by, if it's not holy name, then Krishna related stimuli. And that way, so give the mind some room to wander, which will not increase the distraction, but which will actually help in redirection. Sometimes you can keep some quote about the holy name, some quote about the mind, nature of the mind, the importance of focusing. Mm, and also if you're chanting with devotees, and what happens is, if we may feel tired, we may feel bored, but we see somebody else who is serious, that helps us. Mm, then that will help us. Oh, let me also focus. So in general, try to have devotional stimuli, or stimuli conducive to concentration, or conducive to refocus on the holy name. And now if we get some realization during chanting, what do we do? Well, generally speaking, it's best to recognize that the realization comes from Krishna. And if I am focusing on Krishna as the holy name, Krishna will again give me that realization later. I don't have to stop the chanting to focus on the realization. Now, of course, sometimes some realization, some idea, some inspiration comes so strongly, it's just consuming our mind, and it's not going away. Then maybe occasionally we can take a pause, we note something down, and then start chanting. But we don't should make that as a habit. It's not that we should be looking for realizations. And assuming, oh, this can be a great realization. Many times in the early days when I used to write, I used to look for ideas for writing. So there were times when I would stop my chanting to maybe note something down. But I would find that after the chanting, when I would reevaluate the idea, hey, this is not such a great idea. At that time, it would seem such an amazing idea. But afterwards, yeah, okay. So what is happening is the mind is exaggerating the speciality of that idea so that it can get an excuse for going away from the holy name. So that's why we can have faith that Krishna will give those realizations again in the future. Now, is our willpower destined? Well, yes and no. Destined means that we all have a starting point to our willpower, and that can be determined by our past life. If we consider that the soul is here, the soul is surrounded by the mind, and the soul is now going on a particular life path. So both the kind of mind that the soul has, you can say the mind as well as the body, the kind of the mind body machine that the soul has, this is determined by past karma, and the kind of incidents that are going to happen. I'm saying these upward and downward arrows. I'm saying these are good things coming to us and good things going away from us. All this is also determined by our past karma. Now, how we drive on this road is up to us, the role of life. So, yes, sometimes willpower can be destined. Some people have, just like some people have greater intelligence than others, some people have greater wealth than others, some people have better looks than others. So, among the 6 opulences of Krishna, which a soul can get by good karma, renunciation is also an opulence of Krishna, which also can come by good karma. So, some people may have a greater capacity for renunciation, which can be broadly associated with willpower and discipline. Yes, some people can, like, they can naturally work with 5 hours of sleep. Some people need 8 hours of sleep. Some people naturally eat less. Some people eat more. It's just natural. Even in so this is natural. But from wherever we are, we can take incremental steps and improve. And for some people, improvement in some areas will be very easy. For some people, it will be difficult. And now we commit the same blunder again and again. That means that that conditioning is particularly strong and it will take time. So we need to be patient with ourselves. And sometimes if we are finding that one particular battle is very difficult to win, then don't fight that battle. Not that means you just let ourselves do whatever comes over there, but rather don't define yourself by success in that battle. Try to fight some other battle and try to work on that, improve that. We also need some success in our endeavors. When we get that success, and we also become more confident. you also become more convinced that this process of bhakti works. It can work for me, and then we can revisit a particular battle. So sometimes we want to chant attentively, but chanting attentively is difficult. That doesn't mean we deliberately chant inattentively, but that means that we don't want to constantly let ourselves feel guilty and discontented because chanting is not good. Try to focus on something else. Maybe I like to study scripture. Uh, I like to hear classes. So I'll make sure that I'm awake and alert in classes. I make notes. I reflect on the notes. So show Krishna that we want to connect with him through whatever is doable for us. And then as we do that, then Krishna will reciprocate and we'll have strength in other things also. Okay, last question. We'll stop here after this. How can we discipline daily routine? Well, it's by increment. Just start with some small thing. In general, this is the key. See, when we think self-transformation, see, I am here, present me, sorry. This is the present me, and this is the future me. Now, quite often what we try to do is, we think that I'll take like one giant jump, a giant leap, and this present me will transform into that future me. But actually, what we need is that kind of giant leap. If we try to take, we go here and we fall down, and then we often go lower than where we are. So what we need is incremental steps. Slowly, steadily, shanai shanai ruparamed, buddhya dhriti gruhitaya. Gradually. So how do we get discipline? Set small goals, achieve those goals. Set small goals, achieve those goals. And that way we move forward. And if our mind is in ignorance and does not want to use meager into strong past impressions in mind, what can we do? That's what we have to recognize, that some impressions may be very difficult. So choose your battles. Some battles are difficult to fight, and sometimes we try to make Krishna consciousness into like a 1-0 thing. I have to do all these things, otherwise I'm not Krishna conscious. Yeah, maybe I have to do all these things, but it's not that I have to do all these things simultaneously. It's like, say, if you consider India, this is a very poor map of India. Let's put it, I'll not make a map. India. Now, if India thinks, okay, we have Pakistan as an enemy over here, we have China as an enemy over here, then maybe we have Nepal and Bhutan, they're also becoming a little hostile. Bangladesh also, we don't know. So now, if India decides I want to fight with all of them, it's going to be very, very difficult. So, although we have some capacity to fight with, one of my friends is in the military. India is increasingly trying to prepare for fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. But no country can fight with its full strength on multiple fronts. So we have to focus on some fronts at some time. So if India is focusing on dealing with Pakistan, at that time it is not going to be antagonizing China. At that time, okay, there is a conflict with China, but at this stage, live and let live. First we'll deal with Pakistan, then we'll deal with China. So like that, sometimes what happens is, we have finite willpower and we try to fight infinite battles. We are going to be not only defeated but destroyed if we do that. So yes, if some conditionings are very, very difficult to overcome, then leave that. Say China is much tougher than Pakistan to deal with. So don't mess with China right now. Okay, focus on Pakistan. Focus on something which we can deal with. And once we deal with that, then later on we can deal with other things. So choose your battles. Okay. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Stop recording or what?
Stop sharing.
Okay, stop sharing. Okay. It's not being shared.